You know, most weeks our youth group is divided, and by that I mean we try to keep middle school kids away from the high school kids. There's a good reason for that. Seniors in high school don't really want to hang out with 8th graders, and 9th graders think that they've gotten too mature for the middle school kids. And beyond that, we just don't have room for all of our kids in the middle at one time in our ministry center. So most weeks what happens is we alternate. One week the high school youth will meet at the ministry center while our middle school kids meet at homes and in small groups. And the next week our middle school kids will meet at the ministry center while our high school kids are at homes and in small groups. And in a way that exposes our kids both to the ministries that we expect even our adults to be a part of by being a part of small groups, and also by helping them to see a little bit of worship and seeing themselves as a community of believers. Now, this past week was a little bit different. Our initial plan was to meet at the new Water's Edge property and to spend the hour walking around, imagining the future and praying for the Water's Edge. We just wrapped up last week our series on the circle maker, and we talked about praying circles around things, and we thought it would be really cool for all of our kids to gather and to walk circles around that property, to imagine the ministries that would someday take place there and the people who would walk through those doors. Of course, Old Man Winter prevented that. And so instead, all of our middle school students and all of our high school students gathered at the ministry center. I don't know if you've ever tried to put 60 people in 1,000 square feet before, but it was pretty cramped, and it was pretty awesome at the same time. Our students sat in groups around the basement in circles of 6, and when we ran out of space for that, we moved a few of them into Craig's office, and we said, "Don't touch anything." They sat in the conference room, which we call the living room at the office, and they sat in chairs of our staff by our desks. And they prayed. They prayed for their families, for their futures, for their friends, for their schools. They prayed for their teachers and their administrators. They prayed for the Water's Edge, for the children who are in the frog pond this morning and every week. They prayed for the families who attend this church, and the families who don't yet attend this church, or who may never. They prayed for our staff, they prayed for our pastor, they prayed for all of the volunteers at our church, and they prayed for our missions and our outreach. They prayed for our church's future, and they prayed for our community. At the end of the night, we concluded our series on prayer with the youth, and we gathered in the basement and we made a circle, which actually, because of the lack of the ability to actually make a circle, it looked a lot more like an amoeba. As we closed with the Lord's Prayer, I couldn't help but open my eyes and take a peek around the room. It was a beautiful sight. 60 teenagers and volunteer leaders praying together. And I thought to myself, how did I get here? Today's scripture that Bailey read just a couple of minutes ago, King Solomon writes, "There is a time for every event under heaven." We mark our lives by the events and the happenings that we experience. Birth, baptism, vacations, mission trips, confirmation, graduation, our first job after college, or maybe our first job in high school, sporting events and activities that we participate in, the day we get married, the day our children are born, our anniversaries, the day our grandchildren are born, the day we die. All of these can be specific moments, these events of our lives, like a wedding, or they can be lengthy periods, like dealing with cancer or going through a divorce. We record our lives with pictures, mentally or physically. We invite others to join in celebration to remember our past and to help us prepare for our future. And all along the way, these events serve as mile markers in our lives. Rightly so, because we are, or where we are, and where we hope to be, and where we hope to go doesn't really make much sense unless we can figure out where we've been and how we got here. This month, we're starting a new series called Timeline. You may have read it already online in the newsletter, or you may have received your newsletter in the mail. 2 weeks ago, we celebrated the confirmation of 19 students. Next week is Mother's Day. The week after that, we'll graduate and recognize some of our seniors. And then there's graduation itself and Memorial Day weekend. After that, summer starts, vacations happen, our youth will go on mission trips, and there's plenty of memories to be made. All of these events and all of these things will be well documented. We'll have Instagram photos, Facebook updates, and Twitter feeds that we can someday look back on and say, I remember that moment. Years from now, when we say, how did I get here, wherever that may be, we'll look back to our timeline for answers. But even before Twitter, before Facebook, and before MySpace, we've kept timelines for our lives, haven't we? We've recorded our lives, and especially the major events, in some sort of fashion for all of human history. And all of these events in our lives, even some that happened before our lives began, have led each and every one of us to here. Most of us have a moment or maybe a few moments in our lives where we look around the room, we glance across the table, we lean back in our chair in our office, and we think these 5 words. How did I get here? And I'll be honest, there have been times in my life where I've wondered and put a question mark at the end of that statement. How did God lead me to where I was? I've found myself full of confusion or hurt or pain. And those 5 words end with a question mark. And there's other times where I've felt so at peace or I've been so full of joy that the words have come out like an exclamation. How did I get here? Exclamation point. I can't do the same sounds that Victor Borga did, if you know who he is. I got one laugh. Good. The thing I want to look at today, though, is not the words. How did I get here? Instead, I want to ask you, if you were to say those words to yourself right now, would you end them with an exclamation mark or a question? The more I thought about it this past week, the more I revisited my own story. I look back over 42 years of history. I need to clarify, I'm only 35 years old. And I realized that there are a number of events in my life that I can look back on and I can see how they have played into how I got here and who I am today. These are letters. The first few are handwritten, and at some point my dad starts typing. And he says, I'm typing to you from my new typewriter. These letters started September 6th of 1969, and the last letter actually was written by my mother July 22nd of 1975. My grandparents, while my dad was in college, were in Morocco, Greece, and during that time, my dad wrote letters to his parents. This is how he communicated. This is how my dad recorded the events of his life over those 6 years. And he didn't have Facebook. He didn't have cell phones. Text messages were a thing of the far distant future. Instead, he had a typewriter. My grandparents saved all of his letters, and they put them in this binder. Much of my dad's college and young adult life is in these pages, much of which I cannot read to you in church. Everything from how he told his dad about this new thing that they started in October of 1970 called Monday Night Football, to a trip to the horse races at a place called Exarban. He even wrote about his dating life, and it is here that my timeline begins. In January of 1971, 6 years before I was born, my dad wrote, I have decided to end my Wartburg career with a bang, and that bang will be as a cheerleader. No, not wearing the knight's armor, but as a male cheerleader, he felt he needed to clarify. A few lines later, he said, with the exception of one, the 6 cheerleaders for the freshmen are cute and good. I'll spare you the details of the first 5, but here's what he writes about the last one. The 6th is something else. She's a really cute one, the cutest of the lot. Blonde, shoulder-length hair, a darn good cheerleader. That's edited, by the way. Great fun, personality, intelligent, and her name is Linda Russell. And he continued, she's from Golden, Illinois, and I've been seen with her a number of times lately. And he actually wrote these words, "I get a real big kick out of her and even enjoy going to the library with her. That's consisted of about 75% of the times I've been out with her." It's a good thing. My dad needed the grades in order to graduate that year. "I think I've learned more about cheerleading from her than from the gymnastics guys that I work out with. At any rate, well, I sort of like her. Follow me?" A year and a half later, in 1972, Linda married my dad, and we fast forward 11 years. It's Memorial Day weekend of 1983, and my family has just moved to Omaha over that weekend. A new place to live just in time for summer. Lucky for me, even though I had graduated from kindergarten in Iowa, my mom discovered that Millard likes to keep their kids in school until just before it's time to start back up in the fall. So I got to go back to kindergarten and meet students and maybe with the opportunity to maybe make some friends, and I discovered that half the kids in my class lived on my street. Now, that was great, but the transition left us looking for a church. And my parents had kind of struggled when they were in Iowa. My dad was not the most excited about going to church every Sunday morning, and I think most of the time he had said, I learned when I was in college, he said he would have rather have been on the golf course. And when we moved to Omaha, they said, we need to go to church together, and they went looking for a church. And they found one. They ended up at the same church that my mom's twin sister and her family attended, and it wasn't anything like the place that we had used to go. I'm told I liked it, and so I grew up there. I attended Vacation Bible School. I became involved with the youth group when I got old enough. I went to camp, and I went on mission trips. I met some of my best friends there, and I had some great experiences. A lot of the events in my life happened through that church. 3 years later, I found myself at summer camp at Camp Calvin Crest in Fremont. It was the summer of 1986, and I had never spent a week at camp before. I didn't know what to expect. I showed up, and I realized that there were some friends that were in my cabin. I showed up, and I met our counselor, Don. Don was a little bit different. He walked with a limp. His feet were 2 whole shoe sizes different. But Don could run fast. And towards the end of the week, I learned a little bit more about Don. He shared his testimony at our campfire one night, and he said that he had been born with a clubbed foot. He had trouble learning to walk. He had leg braces. He even struggled to see how God could love him for a long time. And even he blamed God for being where he was. And yet, through some conversations with his mom and through a lot of other experiences, he began to say he could trust God. He began to see how God had a plan for his life. And as he spoke about God's faithfulness, he realized that God could use him. I could relate. I was born blind in one eye. And I thought, if Don can learn to love and follow God, if God could use Don even with a crooked leg, then maybe me and my blind eye could be used too. Maybe God could use me. That week I accepted Christ as my Lord and my Savior. It was the first thing I told my mom when we got in the car, and she cried. I think they were happy tears. 12 years later, I had transferred to Wartburg College, where my dad wrote all those letters 27 years before. I had been volunteering with my youth ministries back at home after 2 years of college, and when I went to Wartburg, I got involved helping with a couple of churches with confirmation and planning youth events there. I remember trying to do a research project for a class, and I called home to talk to our pastor's wife. She was starting a thing here in Omaha, or hopefully reinvigorating a thing in Omaha called Young Life. And as I talked to her, she said, I think that there's Young Life in Iowa. Well, you should look it up and see if you can find it. I looked into the yellow pages, and I discovered that there was a Young Life club about 20 miles away. So I called the number, and I talked to their area director, and I said, I'm interested in volunteering. He invited me to attend a golf tournament. I couldn't pass that up and learn a little bit more. And when I showed up, what happened that day defined how I would spend the rest of my life. I get to the golf tournament, I get checked in, and I go and I say, who's Mike? who was the guy I talked to. I was pointed to a guy who's standing over on the side. I went over, I introduced myself to him. We talked for about 2 minutes. He said, "It's really great to meet you," and I went inside for lunch. A few minutes into the lunch, Mike stands up. He says, "Thanks everybody for coming and for supporting Young Life." And he says, "We've got some exciting things going on this year. We're going to be starting a Young Life club at Waterloo West High School. And this is Nick, and Nick is going to be leading that club." And he says, "And I want to introduce you to Chad. How do you say your last name again?" I go, "Shookman." And he goes, he said it wrong. I don't even remember how he said it. But he goes, "Yeah, Chad's going to be coming on staff with us, and he's going to be starting Young Life in Waverly, Iowa." I said, "I thought I was coming to a golf tournament." That was my official introduction to youth ministry as God's calling in my life. 9 years later, I got married. We went on our honeymoon, and a week after our wedding, we packed up all of our things. Kim and I moved to Omaha to start serving at Faith Westwood and the Water's Edge. I realized during that time that I was officially responsible for somebody other than myself. And I also realized I had moved her away from her family, away from Oklahoma and into hostile territory. Now, I've been paying for it for the last almost 6 years. But those last 6 years have been a great ride. We've seen some really cool things happen. We saw the birth of our son Caleb in November of 2010. When he was born, I realized I wasn't going to get to golf as much as I really wanted to. That my life was not about me. This fall, we're expecting a little girl. I have no idea how to raise a daughter. To be honest, it scares me a little bit more than when Caleb was born, but I'm also incredibly excited. These are not all of the major events in my life. We'd be here for a really long time if I were to share all of them with you. But my guess is that most of you have found yourself somewhere along the timeline. You've experienced some similar events. You've moved to a new place, or you've been forced to make new friends. You've had to find a church where you fit in, and you've had to get connected. Maybe, and hopefully, this is the place that serves that for you. You've had a moment where you just knew that God was there with you, or you felt God's hands of protection over you. You probably remember your first day of college or your last day of high school. You have the first time you met your husband or your wife imprinted in your brain, or maybe you'd like to have that erased. You have pictures from the day your first child was born, and your second child, and your third, and maybe even your fourth. And if you've got more than 4, you probably got tired of spending money on film, and so you just recycled the other kids' pictures and told them that that's them too. But if we look back at all of these events, what we begin to realize is that each one of them fits into our own timeline. Each event we have somehow fits into the schedule of our lives. Other times, the things that happen to us, the events fit into God's timeline. And timing is everything. In the Greek language, there's 2 different words for time, chronos and kairos. Chronos is the word from which we come up with chronology or chronological time. It's how we as humans measure minutes, seconds. I did that backwards. Seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years. And we often look back at our lives and we see that on such and such birthday, this happened. Or when I was this age, I got this. But there's another kind of time. There's another way that events happen in our lives, and it's something we don't always necessarily notice or pay attention to or even understand. It's called kairos. In Greek, the kairos or kairos means the right or the opportune time for something to happen. Early Christians used this term to describe the appointed time in the purpose of God, or the time when God chooses to act. Sometimes we ask God for things to happen by such and such date or within a certain time period. We put a chronos, a clock on it. It's our time. It's our schedule. And when it doesn't work out the way we think that it's supposed to, when we think that maybe God hasn't heard us or that God doesn't necessarily want to bless us. So we get impatient. Maybe we stop praying for something that we believe or have believed for a long time that God really desires for us. Essentially, when things don't work out how we had planned or how we had always thought they would, maybe we give up on it or we lose faith. To ask God to do something on our chronos is a lot different than to ask Him to do it on His kairos. You see, most of the time, God doesn't work on our time. He works on His. And when life happens and we don't see it this way, we can find ourselves saying, how did I get here? With a question mark. And then there are exclamation points. There are those moments like I had last Wednesday when I look around the room, or when we look around the room and we realize what a wonderful place that we're in. And it's not always perfect, but on Wednesday with that room with 60 kids praying and worshiping God, I couldn't help but have my heart exclaim, how did I get here? In 3 weeks, 500 kids are going to walk out these doors as high school graduates. This past week, a lot of students wrapped up their college careers. I can tell you that at 18, when I walked out the doors of my high school, and even at 23, when I went through my college commencement ceremonies, I could not have told you that I would be standing here with all of you today. But today, I can look back and I can see how each and every event in my life has helped me to become the person that I am today, and it has brought me right here. Most of these things, when I really think about them, didn't happen in the time frame that I had given God for them to happen. Instead, they happened on God's time. I have a birthday coming up soon. I will officially be in my late 30s. Wednesday was awesome, but I also know that it's not the end of the road. I also know that I'm not done yet, and God is not done with me yet. This past week, going down memory lane has been a wonderful trip. And maybe some of you are visiting your own memory lanes right now. And you're asking the question, or maybe you're making the same statement. But wherever you find yourself, whether you feel like you're just getting started or you're maybe starting to wrap things up, don't ever forget, God isn't done with us yet. There's more to the adventure. If you're getting ready to graduate from high school or college, I'm going to promise you this. You have not arrived yet. And if you are retiring, or you're recently retired, or you're even thinking about retiring, I want you to remember, you're not done yet. This morning, we had a number of our church members who stood at the starting line of a marathon or a half marathon, and they were asking themselves the question, how did I get here? What possessed me to sign up and do this? How did I get here? And by now, most of them, if not all of them, are standing in the middle or have walked across the finish line, and they're in the middle of Tom Osborne Field in Memorial Stadium, and they're exclaiming, how did I get here? Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3 says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Life isn't a sprint. It's not a quick race to the finish line. Rather, it's a series of events. It's a series of happenings and memories that we make. It's a series of changes that we experience in our lives. And life isn't over until it's over. So today, no matter who you are, I want you to remember, you've still got some miles to go. There's still at least a few more events, if not a lot more events, left in your life. And through God, through his endurance that we experience, we can realize that there's still plenty of gas left in the tank. Maybe you've heard the poem, The Dash. Every tombstone has 2 dates on it. One of those dates marks our physical birth. The other marks our physical death. But there's a dash between those dates. That dash is not just a symbol, or it's not just a piece of punctuation. Instead, it's actually a representation of everything, every event, every happening, every moment between those 2 dates. It stands for the timeline of our lives. We each have events and moments and things that have brought us right here. And we each have more events going forward. Everyone who is here today has not put that second date down. You're still living the dash. So I want to encourage you today to live it. I want to ask you to trust that God will continue to lead you to the point where someday you're going to be saying back to God, how did I get here? My hope is that instead of with a question mark of confusion, you'll be saying that statement with an exclamation point of wide-eyed wonder at the way that you've experienced God's love and grace in the events of your life. So live your life. Look forward to those events and see how God is moving in you, getting you here and taking you there. Let's pray.